Speaker, I hadn't intended to come along today, and it is actually a real pleasure to follow the honourable member from Cheltenham, who rightly speaks of real progress that is being made in the stalking bill, and that actually there's no need to have some sort of ping-pong over who's done more about domestic violence, sexual violence and stalking, because frankly we should all be trying to do everything that we can. And I don't care who does it as long as it gets done. But the issue, I think that the legislation and the amendments before us today, specifically the one around stalking, present real progress, legislative progress, but it will mean absolutely nothing if, in practice, legislation isn't realised. And I'm afraid to say that, as somebody who has worked on the front line, so often we make brilliant rules in this place, beautiful, fancy written rules, still on all the fancy goat skins, and it means absolutely naff all to people living in the places because of resources, because of issues around how things are properly realised by the different agencies. And that is why I wanted to stand and talk about the Victims' Code and the amendments around the Victims' Bill that was put forward by my honourable friend from Holborn and St Pancras, and urge the government to consider the amendments and consider making a more robust framework for what is a brilliant... the Victims' Code is a brilliant piece of regulation. It is, and no, I have no doubt that every single person in here is totally committed to making things better for victims. I don't sign up to the idea that you're baddies and we're goodies. I think we all come to this place because we all want to make something better. And at the moment, let me tell you, as somebody who was the victims champion for Birmingham and did a huge piece of work on victims, on the Victims' Code, on victims legislation with the government's Victims Commissioner, who did it alongside me, what I found is that if you could find me a victim that knew what the Victims' Code was, I'm going to give you some cash now, because people don't realise that they've got this many days to ask for this. People don't realise that they have that many, you know, that they can have a victim statement. Only 30% of people remembered even being asked for one. And if I ask members in this House to think back to the day that the murderer of our friend and colleague Joe Cox was sentenced, the thing that we don't remember from that day is that man. The thing we remember is Brendan Cox standing and making the victim statement outside the court that he had made inside the court because he knew he had the rights to do it. That is rare, but it was so powerful in that case. It is imperative that we look at the amendments around the Victims' Law and see how we can strengthen them, because I am telling you now, from my experience, not you, Mr. Speaker, of course, I'm telling all, that people, at the moment, the Victims' Code is a hope as far as people who are victims of crime are concerned, and the amendments that have been put down today, the opposition amendments, would definitely make it stronger, and definitely for victims of stalking, definitely for victims of sexual violence. And so I would ask the government to think again. I also just want to make a quick point about the amendments around, I suppose, an equality of arms in cases where the state is an actor in... and I stand here and speak for the victims of the Birmingham pub bombings, who are not just my constituents, they are my friends. And their plight at the moment, we have a matter of weeks to answer their plight. Currently, the coroner, the chief coroner, agrees with them that they have not been provided with an equality of arms, and so an adjournment has taken place before their inquest can be reopened, and we have until February to right that wrong. And at the moment, I see nothing that is telling me that that is going to change. And I would ask the government again to look at these amendments and think, how would you feel if it was the constituencies in the families in your constituency, as the families of the Hillsborough, go on,
Minister Brandon Lewis.
With regard to the situation over the Birmingham situation, I would suggest I'm very happy to have a conversation with the Honourable Lady outside of this chambers. I think she might have slightly misunderstood what's happening, and I'm happy to give her a bit more detail of what's happening with the legal aid process.
Jess Phillips.
I'm only too aware that the Minister will almost certainly tell me that the legal aid has been granted, that the legal aid through the legal aid agency has been granted to 2 out of the 7 families of the complainants. And whilst I am more than happy to meet with the Minister outside of here, I'm going to wager that I know a bit more about it than perhaps he does. I'd be delighted to be proven wrong, and that in fact the Home Office have heard our requests for Hillsborough-style funding. I will be delighted, and I will stand on every single platform I can to say how I was wrong and the Minister knew more than me, if that is what he has to tell me. So I look forward to that. I will conclude by saying that I think that we all want something that is better. We all want victims to be treated better, and the honourable member from Cheltenham has shown with passion how that can be realised. But what we do in this place, unless we make sure our regulations are enacted, you know, it's slightly for nothing. So I would ask them to look again at the amendments around victims' rights.